with me, Martin Frentzen, that runs Welledge in Old Town of Stockholm in Sweden. And with me, I have Dr. Richard Barwell, which is actually one of the big mentors, teachers of mine within the chiropractic. It's actually one of the core reasons that I started up Welledge was due to the fact meeting you many years back now. I think it was like 2002 or something in Barcelona. No, I heard about you in Barcelona. Then I met you in Ireland for the first time.
Ireland.
Yeah.
Crazy Irish group.
Yeah. And you've been in the field of chiropractic for many, many, many years and done some amazing things in the arena of chiropractic and for chiropractic that I would really like more people in Scandinavia and those listening to take part of, about the arena of chiropractic in its broader scope of a sense of neurology-based chiropractic. We talk about you as the grandfather of neurology-based chiropractic. So
it's been a long career. I think it's 57 years that I've been in chiropractic, and I'm enjoying, I must admit, my almost a year of retirement. I haven't really fully retired because I have done some talks and then podcasts and such. And I part of me doesn't want to leave it behind, but part of me said that when I turned 80, I think I better take some time for myself to do a few things with what time I have left. So it's been a very strange year to sort of stand back and turn it over to the young people, such as yourself. You believe it or not, young people.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your history, and you're originally from Canada, although you these days you live in the States.
Yes, but I'm still a Canadian citizen.
Yeah. But you've been within this arena of chiropractic where it's been about the core principles of chiropractic, how to keep the promise of chiropractic where we came from and where we are aiming to adhere to stay true to the core beliefs of chiropractic and what chiropractic can actually give to people, what we can actually achieve for people in the sense of neurology-based chiropractic. So you have a very interesting story about that, the scope of chiropractic, the field of chiropractic, and how you have implemented the modern science with EEG. And after that, Neuro Infinity, how we actually can measure what we achieve when we do a chiropractic adjustment, which we're going to go through as an effect on the nervous system, and I mean particularly on the brain, which is the big pattern breaker that you was one of the originators of. So if we back to that arena when you met Alva Myers and the startup of the 100 case EEG study that became the 4-case study publication.
Well, it starts a long way back because I decided in 1960 when I was in high school that I had help from chiropractic. I had got injured in football and nothing was happening to help me. And I went to a chiropractor who is also rather famous in the history of the profession, a fellow by the name of Dr. Gordon Potter, who did a lot of work with Kirkcaldy Willis up in Saskatoon. And that's a whole nother story that's just absolutely fascinating. But I decided to go into chiropractic. And so I went to Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College. Dean Homewood was the dean of the college at the time. And at that time, chiropractic was really struggling. I mean, it was we were called quacks, and there was no foundation at all for what we were doing, except that we got great results.
Yeah.
And we great results across a broad spectrum of challenges, health challenges to people, and we were still involved in the era. BJ was still alive when I went to chiropractic college. And so, now you move back and the spirit was there about the power of chiropractic, but it was all based on philosophy and rah-rahism, we can do this, we can do this. But there was no science. There was no science. There was no research that was really going on, except for the work that BJ did, which was so far out there that most people didn't understand him at all. I mean, the guy was an absolute genius, and geniuses walk on a fine line, you know, of insanity to genius. And he was in that category. He was an amazing man. So when I went through college, the struggle for chiropractic was basically, who are we? We started moving more and more at that time from a broad spectrum of chiropractic can help you be healthy to the spine. And it became chiropractic was about a straight spine. And we even had posture contests in North America for taking full spine x-rays of young women. I mean, they don't talk about the radiation that was going on, but, you know, that was our focus. And so I watched in my years of practice, and I practiced for 32 years, and some in Australia, but mostly in British Columbia. And I watched the profession morph, and it started to change. And it went from a straight spine to more structural concept that chiropractic was about joint function and joint mechanics. And then it went to chiropractic is really good about pain relief for low back pain. And all the studies came out on chiropractic and low back pain. Well, every time that you do that, every time that you focus on intent, and we're going to get into that in a minute, an intent of chiropractic, you have to, that really affects how you measure the effectiveness of chiropractic, and it affects what those outcomes are. And so if you're looking for pain, you're restricting the profession then strictly to pain relief. And you start to ignore that broad spectrum that we had to begin with, where we were helping people with everything and didn't know why it worked or how it worked. And now we got involved in socialized medicine and insurance coverage, and that really pushed us towards the medical diagnosis. And because in that field, when you get into insurance or socialized medicine, it's all based on the medical model, and the medical model needs a diagnosis in order to be rendering treatment. And the only diagnosis they have is medical models. And so all of a sudden we left that alternative field where we weren't looking at that, and we were stuck with looking at low back pain or sciatica, or then we had to have joint dysfunction. And then it got worse and worse and worse, and they started to more and more restrict chiropractic down to that medical model. And the biggest problem is if you're on pain relief or if you're a structural model, once you achieve reduction in pain or change in structure, you're done. You have no jurisdiction then to carry on chiropractic care if you have succeeded in reducing the pain or changing the structure. And so it has to end. It doesn't go on. And that's not where the strength of chiropractic truly lies.
No.
So that my career took me for 32 years in practice, watching crazy things happen in my office that I couldn't explain. So I adjust a lumbar area and somebody's asthma disappears. Well, there isn't a nerve that runs from the L4 to, the lungs. It's just like, so that drove me crazy. It just absolutely drove me crazy, going like, there's something else happening here. And it's not just all about chiropractic is great. It's about, I have a responsibility to really figure out what I'm doing. Okay. And
that,
keep going, or you want to talk from
that's a key point, to get to know what is it that we actually, we know that we get results and people experience all sorts of results, but you kept yourself in an open mind, a questioning mind, for being open to receive all these other results instead of the more limited, that the only thing that you're prepared to see is people that have symptoms, and that's what you help them with. And when the symptoms are gone, your job is done. But we know that when we work from the perspective of actually improving function, that how can we continuously support the function of the body. When the brain and the body functions more optimally, then things start happening. That's the scope of practice I believe that you always had, although you have had a variety of explanations for it as the research has progressed and supported the results that was always there. But I think an important thing there to stay with, and we're going to get to that again for those that are listening, that we talked about intent, we're going to get there more, but when we limit what we are willing to receive from a care, whether it's from a chiropractor or anyone, both as the receiver patient, but also as the one that gives the care, that something happens. What you're willing to have as results. And we're going to get back to that again, but that's one key feature of what you're talking about now. Because you kept yourself in an open mind. That's something that not everybody does that in the profession.
That open mind both drove me crazy at times because I was so frustrated. And a simple little story that really sort of brought it home to me is I learned a long time ago that if somebody had the hiccups, if I went down into the spinous tip of C6, C7 and just really dug in there, I could break the pattern on the hiccups.
Yeah.
And, I remember we were at a big wine dinner and the woman across the table got the hiccups. And so I finally, and she was really struggling. I went over and I said, I think I can help you. Would you mind let me try? She said, so I got in there and I stopped the hiccups. Her husband was sitting next to her, unbeknownst to me, he was a medical doctor.
Yeah.
And he was looking at me going like, whoa, what was that all about? He said, what did you just do? And I had to honestly say, I had no idea. I just know that it works.
Yeah.
Which is, and I have to admit, I was one of those guys because I was stuck in this field that we really didn't know what was going on. And I rested my laurels on the power of chiropractic on, we know we get results and that's all we need to know. And that's not true. That's the worst thing I could have said. That's all we need to know is we get results. No, we need to know how we get results, why we get results, because that's the only way we can improve who we are and what we do. And we have a huge amount to offer, but we sell ourselves so short. So the guy looked at me and he said, that's the problem with you chiropractors. You can never explain why it works. And he backed me up. I mean, it was a slap across the face because I needed it, that, hey, I have a responsibility here. Yeah. I need to know more. So I'll never forget that moment in my life because it was like, stop messing around and start figuring this out. So the continuation is, I worked with Dr. Guy Riekman. I was in his program many years, and he asked me to come down and join him in Colorado. So I sold my practice after 32 years, and we moved to Colorado, and I worked with Dr. Riekman, running the programs, and I met Dr. Annette Long, who was working with Guy at the time. She's a clinical psychologist, extremely smart woman. On this road trip we just have been taking, I got back in touch with my mentor, Dr. Long, and we just had a great time together. She's doing very well. Dr. Alva Byers was her husband, and he was a research psychologist. He has since passed.
Yeah.
And that connection with those two, who were world experts in EEG studies, electroencephalographs, looking at brain function. They were part of the original group that really looked into this. For 25 years, they've been looking at EEG patterns. So they taught me a lot. They taught me to start looking at the brain. And I suggested to them that the chiropractic adjustment changed brain function. It did not go down well because I had all of a sudden moved into their field and suggesting that what we did was their stuff. But Annette came to the rescue, thank goodness. And we decided we'd test it. And we did that. We took, there was 5 of us in the room, and we decided that we would do an EEG study. Dr. Byers would set it up, the research psychologist, and he did an EEG test on people. Then I adjusted people, and I adjusted people using, and I was doing some manual adjusting at that time. I did one area only. That was all I was allowed to do. So I had to decide what was the major area that I was going to address. And I used a tonal technique to do that, which is
light touch.
Yeah. So once I did that, then we waited 20 minutes, and then we did another EEG, and we saw changes. And I'll never forget Dr. Byers' face when he was looking at this, going like, what's going on here? He said, well, maybe it's the room, maybe it's us, maybe, he came up with every excuse except for the chiropractic adjustment. So I said, okay, from here on, whenever I'm lecturing, you're coming with me, I'm paying the way. And the two of you will come along and we will do pre and post. So we did that for about 3 years. And we had a ton of, now you got to remember, we're dealing with experts in this field. And we saw changes in there that Dr. Byers would be talking, and he'd say, listen, you people don't understand what you have here. We're seeing changes in brain function with a single chiropractic adjustment, and we used everything from light touch to manual adjusting to instrument adjusting. We varied it across the field. And he said, you're getting changes that would take me between 50 to 200 sessions of doing neurofeedback by a world expert, and you're getting those changes in a single adjustment. And I tell you what, it scared me.
Yeah,
it really scared me.
And a session meaning basically an hour's neurofeedback training.
Yeah.
And adjustment takes a few seconds.
200 sessions with one single adjustment. Because then I sort of went, what have I really been doing to my patients? By the grace of the innate intelligence of the body, it was saving me. So it really made me stop and take a look and say, we need to have a better understanding about what really the adjustment does. And all of a sudden, chiropractic to me wasn't about vertebral subluxation anymore. Chiropractic became the power of the adjustment to change people's lives. And I wish this profession would just get that point alone. Stop talking about vertebral subluxation and start talking about the power of the adjustment to change people's lives across the entire spectrum of human function.
Yeah.
Okay. So that left the big question. The big question was, why does it do that?
Yeah.
And so this began my 25-year investigation into chiropractic and the brain and brain function. I don't have a degree outside of what I give myself for 25 years of hard study and research that we did into the brain and how it worked. And this took me all the way back to the beginning of chiropractic. And here it was. We talked about vertebral subluxation, but what was more important about that was, what do we say, and I'll ask you the question, is the cause of vertebral subluxation? What is the tradition?
Well, the tradition is that it said that the difference between someone having health and not health, this is stress. And he said the 3 causes of stress is physical stress, trauma, emotional stress, which is basically, he's used the word autosuggestion, that what's going on in our mental mind, and then toxins, which is all the chemical loads. Today we add on emotional electromagnetic fields, and we can add on other aspects, how we define what are stressors. That stress is the nervous system, the biology. And he was on this 1895.
Yes, these guys were so brilliant that not having any way, excuse me, but I got a cup of coffee coming here.
Oh, delightful.
Ah, that's good. We missed it. We missed the whole point that stress, and we always talked about the 3 T's, but we know that there's more. There's electromagnetic now that was not considered at the time. It was the foundation of the cause of the vertebral subluxation. Well, wait a minute. how's that affect a vertebral subluxation? I mean, so somebody yells at you and what? C2 goes crazy, or L4, or so there's got to be a mechanism behind the stress causing the disturbance structurally, and that's what we've missed that boat, and we should have gone back and said, well, let's hook that up and find out what that is, and that's where I saw my role coming into play. That at the time we had huge fights going on about Save Our Subluxation, SOS group formed, and it was about in defense of chiropractic. That's about chiropractic is vertebral subluxation, and these guys are passionate, but it's all based on philosophy. And here's the challenge with philosophy. We have to have it to differentiate us from the practice of medicine. That's the role of the philosophy of chiropractic. We are not medical doctors, and we do not work in the field of medicine with the way that they approach health. We work from a completely different aspect. So we need a philosophy that separates us. But if it's just philosophy alone, it's only theory. Philosophy is theory. It's nothing more than theory. I don't care how far down you want to take it, to epistemology or ethics and morals. It's still theory. If you try to base a healthcare system, a chiropractic, on theory alone, we can see what the end result is. And that's where we are right now in the profession, going like, no, we need to have evidence. Well, now we got all the philosophy guys thinking evidence is like, danger. The evidence supports the philosophy, and that's where the power really comes to the profession. And we need to put them together, and both sides need to be willing to move towards improving the profession and what we have to offer the world.
Exactly. What questions we ask. I mean, philosophy is about asking questions and staying open-minded, and then using the science to derive what's behind the results we get, and do the models we use have any foundation?
Exactly.
And I mean, neurology has been our foundation from the very start of chiropractic. So to research it more and use that understanding how we as beings adapt to stress. There are a variety of systems within the body and the brain that we use automatically to adapt to stressors, and how that expresses itself in different patterns, which we as chiropractors label as subluxations patterns. But you've been part of developing a model of explaining, because the word subluxation for most people, especially if you're in Sweden, is like, doesn't give it, there's no meaning behind it. But if you understand what causes it, or even more efficiently, the three parts of subluxation that you have been part of developing, which so well connects into the stress model. So
it's very, very interesting watching how it's being dealt with within the profession. If we can move, just think for a moment. Just think the vertebral subluxation. Well, number one, here's the problems with it, and that term subluxation. These guys, when they came up with this concept, they didn't have anything to support it. They just saw that there was a distortion in the spine, and they went in there and did something, and things changed. So therefore, their conclusion was it must be spine oriented, and it must be something at that level and pressure on that nerve. Well, along comes Heidi Havoc, who I love and adore. Even though I cringe at her language now and then. And she proves that doesn't happen, that there isn't pressure on the nerve at the vertebral subluxation. And actually, years and years ago, Riekman and Felicia tried to demonstrate that by putting pressure on a nerve on spines, and found out that the only way they could get the pressure on the nerve create that 60 millimeters of mercury pressure was to fracture the spine. Well, they couldn't tell people that that's what they found. So instead of that, they just ignored it and said, well, it's that nerve is really sensitive, and when we do the adjustment, we take the pressure off the nerve. It's not true. It's not true. And so when you throw that out, it's sort of like, oh my God, you've just destroyed chiropractic. Instead of going like, wait a minute, go back to it, we still get results.
Exactly.
So we're just looking in the wrong place to find out why we get results. We need to get our focus off of the bone on nerve, not off the spine necessarily, because the rich nerve input from the spine areas, from all the facet joints, the discs, the ligaments, the muscles, into the central nervous system is huge. And so that's why we get, when we do an adjustment, it sends a barrage of information into the brain, and the brain gets this information and goes like, okay, you've got my attention, now what? And it allows the brain then to reset itself to more appropriate function for health. Yeah. And that's the power of the brain. It can do that. It can rewire itself and undo bad wirings that's happened because of the stressors that have been involved in creating bad neural patterns to begin with. So all of a sudden it moved from spinal structure or pain relief to brain function. And when I started really looking at how we affected this, and when we showed that those were changes that were going on in the EEG, I realized that we needed to change the terminology. And that's why I went to neurologically based chiropractic. I wanted to shift the intent of chiropractic from correcting structure or reducing pain to actually changing neurological function at the highest level in the body, the brain. Mm. And now we had the proof. But the problem was, and at this time I didn't know Heidi. Heidi didn't know me. And I'm sitting there in Colorado going like, I can make all these claims and I can show some research, but if I can't take this into an office where every chiropractor can demonstrate this lifetime or over time with some sort of acceptable testing method, what I've got to offer is this more philosophy for that sake. Mm. So we went to work and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and time and frustration and to build an instrument. And thank goodness, a company in Canada called Thought Technology came to our rescue, and I told them what we wanted, and they said, we can do that. So we worked together and we put together some instrumentation. It's changed its name and it changed its platform over the years about 4 or 5 times now. But the Neuro Infinity was the sort of the final product, even though it keeps getting updated with software, where we could actually hook somebody up, do a 15-minute test. You don't have to gown. Do a 15-minute test to show what kind of effect different stressors, emotional, physical exercise, and mental stressors have an effect on the brain during this test, and how the recovery of those after those tests. And that's what the Neuro Infinity does. And I'm sort of looking back going, if stressors are the cause of vertebral subluxation, we need to be measuring stressors' effect on the brain that create the vertebral subluxation. And it's not that the vertebral subluxation doesn't exist. It's a fixation. It's not a subluxation per se. It's a fixation in the area. It's an area where stress manifests itself and you get a restriction in motion. That means you get a change in joint function. You get a change in structural responses as a secondary and tertiary response. It's real, and it's a gateway for us to get in to be able to change a neurological pattern in the brain by addressing those areas. So you don't have to do shock therapy on the brain. You can do a much more gentle and another thing we've heard in the profession is less and lighter is better. And I always had trouble going like, I don't understand that. But once I got into looking at this, and there's a law called the law of hormesis. It's a biological law that's been in effect since before chiropractic. And it says this: strong stimulation stops a physiological response. So a dynamic adjustment puts so much information into that brain, the brain goes, what was that?
Yeah.
And it breaks the pattern.
Pattern interruption.
But that pattern has been there for so long, it starts to come back again. So you need to maybe do it 3 or 4 times to get it to at least listen. Then it says a moderate stimulation inhibits. So if somebody's starting to improve and you put a massive, let's say they come in trouble, you put a massive adjustment in, the brain says, whatever you're doing down there, stop. And it stops that physiological response in the body for a second, to the point where the brain says, okay, I'm going to back off on this. I'm not going to be as severe. And you come in the next time and you do another heavy input, you're going to stop what you just created was a good thing. So it's sort of like going down the street and hitting a stop sign or a red light all the way down the street. You know, it gets a little frustrating after a while. So if you modify what you're doing and you do a lighter input, that just inhibits. So that's like coaching. And saying, good move, you stop the bad one. Now, don't let it build up again. Let's get changing. And then the key is light stimulation creates a positive response. Okay, and it encourages. So as somebody goes through care, and I challenge you on this, I challenge all the chiropractors that are listening to this, pay attention to how your patient is responding under your care, and do less or lighter as the patient responds, and you'll see even better results, because that works within that law of hormesis and the natural responses of the body and the nervous system. And so all of a sudden, the guys doing that light touch work that I never understood as a chiropractor because I was taught hammer them, all of a sudden started to make sense. And people like, Ted Korn comes along with Korn-specific technique that I love. I love the stuff. There's a bunch of them out there now. There's some pretty great other ones going on. And you and I both know we've done some testing together and had some fun together. And really saw some incredible stuff going on, and finally getting people to say, stop doing all of that. You're driving this person crazy. So now we've got an instrument that you could literally hook up live time with some patients and do some research yourself and show the difference of how your technique changes with people. And now the last part I'm going to jump on with this is the intent of the individual and the power of intent. Can I go to there? Or
Yes.
You want to say something more? You want to add something at this point?
Well, let's go there, but let's pay attention to the key features that we actually measure with Neuro Infinity, because when we talk about stress, there are physiological responses within the body, but most people do not. Well, we all know that you get muscle tension, so that's a good thing to measure. It actually measures the EMG, the electromyography, that you measure the muscles on, which is one part of the Neuro Infinity. And many people know that when they get stressed, they get cold hands. So they understand, but that the temperature shift can be so minute in response to stress, so that when we hook someone up with the Neuro Infinity and measures the temperature difference, it's such a mind opener for people to see that sound can have such a huge effect on the temperature in the hand, although they might not necessarily feel themselves. They're not capable of perceive the difference in the muscle tension, the temperature shift, how wet, moist their hands goes, except when they're extremely hugely stressed, then they can feel it. But to pay attention to these key features and actually make them measurable and make minute shifts measurable, so that a person can actually know that, okay, I'm in this range where my muscles are too tense, my temperature is out of the normal, the skin is moisture of the skin is not the same as it should, heart rate is out, breathing pattern is out, the heart rate variability is out, and the central nervous system. Looking at the EEG, you see that the EEG measurement between the two hemispheres is totally out. All the patterns of stress, and you can measure once again when things start to come into what is well known parameters, measurement scope, that this is within the normal field when our nervous system is in a adaptive recuperative state, when we're actually recovering from stress. Then we know how the nervous system behaves.
Yeah, it's just people, are aware of fight flight, right?
Yeah.
That's it creates fight, and that's one of the areas that really opened up when I started looking at the brain. I said, well, if stressors are the cause, I need to understand what stress does to brain function, and in order to look at that, you have to look at all parts of the brain, from the lower levels that deal with the stress response to keep your life alive, to be able to run or fight, all the way up to what's really going on with the control area in the cortex and the prefrontal cortex that really makes humans, and how stress affects that area. And so that was my 25 years of study, looking at the effects of stress on brain function, how those patterns show up, and then how not just show up under stress, but whether or not we recover. And I have to tell you that the recovery from stress is actually more important than the stress response.
Exactly.
Because people are not recovering, especially in COVID. All you have to do is take a look at what's going on in America right now. The gun shootings, the violence, the crazy irrational activity that's going on, the hate, that's all stress responses. That's changed brain patterns so that people do not, they only think emotionally now because of all the stress that's gone on because of COVID and what it's done. And so all the reactions are emotional. There's no logic involved anymore. The prefrontal cortex now is so damaged from the stress that it's just become an emotional response. And the amygdala that controls the emotion is actually now more sensitized than it was before. And our ability to think rationally is gone. And that's what's going on right now. And people don't realize that it's all stress. And we can change that by improving how the brain deals with function and recovers from all this stress. And guess what the key factor of this? It isn't drugs and it isn't surgery, because both of those are stressors.
Yeah.
Okay. So it only leaves us with one thing that really comes into play that has a huge effect. Remember that 50 to 200 sessions of neurofeedback? One adjustment was doing the same. And that's why chiropractic right now has the opportunity to take a lead role in worldwide health. Because once you recognize that what we do with our adjustment is improve the brain's ability to deal with stress and to recover from it, to keep us alive and well. How important is chiropractic? Is it about a bone out of place, or is it about improved brain function?
Exactly. And as we improve brain function, everything else happens. And that's what we know today, that that can give a model for explaining all these results that we get. But also the stress model gives an explanation for all the symptoms that people can show up with and start with as well. But I want to get back to one part, because we both know many people, when they think about, it's becoming more and more familiar that people they wear Oura Ring or the Apple Watch and things, they want to measure themselves. Mm-hmm. So obviously there's an increased awareness of the discrepancy that can be between what a measurement show and how you feel. But especially when you measure so many parameters that we do with the Neuro Infinity of how the nervous system is behaving, it becomes so apparent how big discrepancy there can be between how you feel within yourself and what's actually going on, what's your physiology actually showing. Which brings us back to what you were saying, that when your cortex is in fight and flight, you're not as good as you ought to be to actually pay attention to what's going on in your body. You are adapting, but the way you're adapting is that you feel less of what's going on in your body, and you feel less what's going on in other people. So you can be adapting, but the adaptation is that you are less sensitive to what's happening within yourself and others, and you can therefore respond in a much worse way than you could as a human being if you were in contact with yourself. And I think doing the measurements can be such a mind opener for many people that I see that we do it with, that they realize, this data and how I feel, okay, they do not correlate. For some people, especially men in the CEO function, I've been working a lot with upper people in management and so forth, which is very much in the mind. But when they see the data, you cannot question it, because it's data, and they have to take it in mentally and realize, okay, this is going on in my body, and this is not good. Yeah. And the good thing is we can change it now.
Yes. It's interesting points. Like Chopin would never have written any of his music if he was stuck in the middle of a battlefield.
No.
In the middle of a battle, it's all about survival of myself. And so you don't get a chance to explore those other incredible areas of the brain. The brain, 90% of brain function, 90% of brain function is at the subconscious level. What we think we are, who we are, and what we're doing and how we're acting is only a very small 10% of brain function. So you can't, with that 10% was only there to sort of inform this stupid individual that, hey, there's a fire around you, maybe you should leave. Okay. Yeah. But meanwhile, while that was going on, 90% of the brain was working on trying to keep you alive while you're an idiot standing in a burning house. And so that's why it has to reach a certain level of challenge before it registers in the conscious mind. So you can have a problem developing from cancer to asthma to heart problems to you name it, long before it ever becomes a conscious awareness. Yeah. Long before. And I'm a typical example of that. And here's a person who's studied this and understands this. I have now moved into a type 2 diabetic state because of the stress that I was undergoing. And I knew the symptoms were there, but they were already, I was already there before that even happened. And so now I'm working very hard at getting my diet back in line and paying attention, getting adjusted, doing the right things, getting exercises to try to get this back under control. Yeah. And so now that I'm aware of it, finally it got my attention. The subconscious said, I'm going to keep slapping you until you wake up. And I woke up. Yeah. So that's what happens with people. And when we start talking about, if you're so involved in stress to the point where it's just defense about staying alive, you don't care about anybody else. Yeah. You lose contacts about empathy and sympathy. It disappears because it's all about me. And again, look at America. All about me. That's what's going on here right now. Yeah. And it's not just here, it's worldwide, because we're in a crisis. Yeah. Our immune systems are so damaged that this was coming. We knew it was coming because we're like lemmings, there's too many of us and we're putting too much stress on it. So let me go back now and talk about the effect of intent in all of this. Yeah. And that's one of the issues that happened to me in practice. And it was a moment of reckoning when I finally said, listen, so far, I've been working on what I've been trained. I was trained to look for vertebral subluxation and correct it. So my intent was to find vertebral subluxations or distortion in the spine and adjust that. I took x-rays, pre and post. The posts were never that much difference. The patient felt much better, but I wasn't that satisfied with it. So I couldn't justify radiating people for post, so you stop doing them, just because I got the results. Remember, I was after results. Once I started moving down the line of looking at neurological approaches on this, immediately my intent went from finding vertebral subluxation to finding where the adjustment would be most effective to change the neurological pattern. In other words, I changed the intent of my care. Well, I changed the intent of my care. That means I have to change how I measure the responses to that care, because I'm using different parameters. It's not correcting a vertebra positioning. It's, did I improve the hand temperature? Did I improve the respiratory rate? Did I improve? So all of a sudden I have all these different measurements to look at that are all part of the fight-flight mechanism and neurological function that's been around forever and a day, that I have accepted norms like you talked about, and that's what we used in the Neuro Infinity. So we know what these things, we know what a resting heart rate should be ideally. We know what it should happen, what should go on during stressors, and whether it should recover within that range. So we took all of those parameters that are well established, and that's what we used in the Neuro Infinity as our foundation. And so we started doing these things live time. That was what was really important for us, is to say, how long does this take? So when you change the intent, you change the outcome, you change how you measure it, and you change areas that you're not even aware of. For instance, your attitude is a doctor in the office is critical. If you had a bad day getting to the office with a flat tire, and then somebody hits your car, and you walk into the office and there's an inch of water on everything, I would suggest you cancel patients that day, because your mental attitude is already out of sync with what you're trying to accomplish to help people. And we exchange information between humans for what we can measure. And I think that's much beyond this, but we know that within 12 feet of one another, we're already exchanging heart information. And so there's a reaction right between patient and doctor. So your attitude and your intent is now being transferred to that patient. So that's why we didn't understand the power of suggestion. We didn't understand the power of prayer. We knew it worked, but we didn't understand it. We didn't understand the difference with things like light touch or instrument adjusting. We've had these techniques around forever. And so now all of a sudden it makes sense. And you can actually do testing and watch what happens in brain with difference of attitude with people. And you can see it live time on the EEG, on the cortex of the brain, the highest level of function of the brain. You can watch how you influence that patient. So your attitude is a key factor in care, as well as what you do and how you do it.
Exactly. And that's such a key aspect, getting back to where we started, when the scope of chiropractic moved into and has been moving into just a pain-based function, but the only thing that you can achieve is reducing someone's pain. That's the only intent of many practitioners, and that's only intent for the one that receives as well. Then you limit what is possible for the brain. Instead of having, okay, what can we do to move this person out of defense physiology into growth physiology? How can we see to that the brain and the body builds new patterns and breaks old patterns and breaks those patterns that are connected with old defense physiology that is no longer needed for here and now, and build patterns in the brain and from the brain to the body and from the body to the brain that supports the full expression of a human being. What can it be then? The promise of chiropractic: unify man spiritual with man physical. It might sound so out of scope for some people, but on the other hand, we know that the decade we're in and the decades to come, it's about embodiment and what is consciousness and what makes us, what's the promise of being human? Why are we here? And it's interesting questions to bring into the field of chiropractic again, which
it's so much fun to have those kind of conversations, especially now when we realize how it happens and why it happens. We have so much more knowledge now about the workings of chiropractic. Heidi Havoc came along, and also, and I know you're going to probably be talking to her again, and I'd like for her to expound on this one. But she showed that the power of the adjustment to change brain function at the highest levels in the prefrontal cortex area lasted for at least 30 minutes after the adjustment, where the brain was then had received the message, hey, pay attention. You have 30 minutes to also add something to retrain that brain to a better pattern. So what you do after the adjustment is very important. BJ discovered that if he left people rest on a bed for 2 hours, they got better results. Well, no wonder, because they went out of defense mode and beta activity in the brain and went down into alpha and theta, which is where healing is the power. And so what are you doing? Maybe balance exercises, brain training, all sorts of things that you can do after the adjustment are just as important as the adjustment.
Yeah, I mean, most chiropractors all through the age, we've always been, with back pain and so forth, go for a walk, which is a great pattern to do activity of daily living. But as you know, Welledge is a neurologically based chiropractic due to you, among others. So that's what I do. I mean, the first 20 minutes, 15 minutes is the chiropractic adjustment, mainly light touch. I do KST and after stim and others as well. But then you have a window of next 20 to 30 minutes. They do brain tapping, they do neurofeedback here, they do biofeedback training here, they do balance training, possible, depending on what's the most supportive for reestablishing new healthy patterns in their system. But that's always been the adjunct since I started Welledge 2005, the chiropractic, and adding on biofeedback, neurofeedback training for them to see that, okay, I can actually change this myself. Now I'm in a state, now my brain, now my hands are warm again, now my body is expressing signs that I'm in health, healing, recuperation, in recovery and adaptability, instead of adapting from a stress physiology perspective. Because there's a huge difference between adapting in health physiology, growth physiology, and adapting with stress coping mechanism, which is what people are doing today. And they don't realize that they use it many times.
Coming to your practice and going through you were the first doctor that really got the message and had that whole series after the adjustment. And you had a series that you moved them through. And I went like, somebody got it. Somebody understood this. And you were so far ahead of everybody else when you did this, and it's been a joy working with you all these years, because you understood what we were trying to accomplish and went after it and set up your whole practice on that basis. It was incredible to see, and you've continued. So I've handed the torch over to you, and you've done a good job with it. Keep going.
Thank you. So what you see, the future of chiropractic. We talked about Heidi Harwick. I've done pods with her. I'm going to do one in a couple of weeks with her again, because her research, as we both love her, about showing, because the evolution of mankind, the evolution of us as human beings, for me, is related to that we actually can utilize everything that we have to our best capacity. All the, as you spoke about, we have these levels in the brain. We have the reptilian brain, which needs to work in its optimal space. We have the mammalian brain, our more emotional brain, which has to work as its optimum. And we have our cortex, and especially our prefrontal cortex, which needs to work at its optimum. And they all need to work in conjunction at the best level. Then we can actually evolve what lies ahead further. And we see that chiropractic has seemingly has the greatest impact on this part. There is the most latest development, which is the symphony director of everything else, which we see more and more research that the more we get this online, due to that the rest of the systems are not in stress physiology, we can become more of who we truly are to be. What's your take on what the future for humankind and the future of chiropractic to nourish that, to usher it forward, the growth of, especially what we see in the last 2 years and what needs to happen in the coming decades?
Oh boy,
the big questions.
Yeah, the profession is its own worst enemy.
Yeah,
we have crazy divisions in the profession, like we do in everything else in our lives these days. We have the group that will only rely on philosophy, and that's they put up a battle, boy, and they want to stay with the philosophy as it was presented over 120 years ago, which needs to be updated. There's more information that can further that philosophy and move it along. And then we have the structural group that says it's just all about the spine and joint mechanics, and that plays into the hands of the physical therapy medical model and ignores the greatest thing that we can offer in improved brain function. And then we have people like you, and they're out there. We have a growing group within the neurologically based, and some of them call them brain-based. They've modified neurologically based to suit themselves, and that's fine. I don't care as long as they can get the big picture. Brain-based chiropractic or brain-based therapies or whatever, and that's where the profession has to go. If it tries to maintain the philosophy and stay in that area, or that's no growth. And when you have no growth, you're dying. Yeah. The profession will die if it stays on philosophy only, or that we only have to know that we get results. Today that doesn't work. Excuse me here. Come on, go away. Somebody wants to sell me car insurance.
Well, we have that, the philosophy of chiropractic, asking the questions, what's our belief system, the model that we're working from. We have the science of chiropractic, and we have the art that should be the expression of how these relate to each other, the dance between the left brain and the right brain. And
the art is the application. Yeah. The philosophy is the asking why, and the science is obviously to establish credibility of the action, and which doesn't mean that it's the answer. It may be the answer of the science at this moment. Exactly. Like I said, I know that there's a whole lot more for measurements of the effect of prayer, for instance, on worldwide events. When we're talking about energy and the power of energy, we don't know yet. That's part of the philosophy. It goes like, well, why did that work? And then the science goes like, well, let's see what we can do to find out why that worked, because then we can strengthen it if it worked good, or remove it if it didn't work good. And that's the role of science, to try to come up with some sort of established measurements to say success or not success. And then we have the art saying, okay, now that we know this, how do we apply this? And that's where, and the art should be constantly changing as well. But chiropractic is too easy. It's just too easy. You go in and you don't have to know anything, and you hammer away at somebody, and because of the power of the innate system for survival, like I said, when I found out that what we were doing, how much damage did I do by doing too much?
Well, you got results. It's just a question about how even better results there could have been. Right. How much better results? It's so easy to get results. So sometimes, how to get even better results through knowing what we actually can achieve when we know these principles that we've spoken about in this pod and so many other aspects.
Yeah, chiropractors kind of like to think themselves as healers, but they're not. They're facilitators.
Exactly.
The healing goes on internally. The power of the brain. Remember, innate intelligence is expressed through the nervous system. Yeah. So, maybe because we can't really control innate intelligence, we don't have the power to truly understand it all. But what we can do is we can help the nervous system function better, so that expression of self-preservation at all levels of human relationships improves. Yeah.
And then the further on self-growth and evolution. Yeah.
The profession has a choice. It has a choice to get on board and move. I know it involves breaking old patterns that you've established in your practice. It involves teaching your patients new information that brings them up to date and makes sense to them. Because when you start talking about brain function, they get it. Because everything today, you pick up the newspapers, there's stuff there on the brain. Yeah. So it's up to us to change what we're offering, change our intent, change our education for the patients, and really change the profession so that we can finally bring to the world what it is that we do.
Yeah, yeah. I like a lot we talk about is obviously about many that listening are obviously chiropractors to this episode, but there also will be a lot of lay people listening, perhaps some people that never seen a chiropractor, never been to a chiropractor. What would you say for people who's never been to a chiropractor? Why should they come to a chiropractor, a brain-based chiropractor?
It starts with this. Gee, have you ever experienced stress in your life?
Yeah.
And you wait for their answer to say, yes, of course I have. Saying, well, you realize that stress affects your brain function. And it causes all sorts of things, from irregular heart activity and irregular kidney activity, irregular digestion. If you ever get your digestion upset because of stress or elimination, or even reproduction. We know that people can't reproduce well under stress situations. So, what would it mean to you if I could tell you there was something we can do to not only help you deal with stress in your life, but also to recover from it at a higher rate, at a healthier rate? Would you be interested in that? And one of the things I love when people ask me what I do now, I don't say I'm a chiropractor.
Yeah.
And, I know chiropractors get bent out of shape when I say that. Oh, I'm a chiropractor, I'm proud of it. And the reason I don't is because people have a preconceived idea of what chiropractic means. Yeah. And if you tell me a chiropractor, that's either, oh, you're a back cracker, or nothing wrong with my back, I'm not in any pain, because that's what we've presented as who we are. Yeah. That's our image that we presented. I tell them that I deal in the field of functional neurology. Yeah. And I love the response. Yeah. The conversation stops and they look at me and they go like, whoa, you must be really smart. And I say, matter of fact, I am. I'm not gonna back down on this situation, saying, but here's what you need to know. It's your brain that deals with stressors in your life, and I can help your brain function better. That's what I do as a chiropractor. I deal in the field of functional neurology. Yeah. Would you like to know how stress is affecting your brain? Because we can measure it and show you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful one. And that's the foundation from your teaching that I built Welledge, and that's what a huge part of the people that come to me, they seek for the broad spectrum of stress, and they know that what I'm doing is so different in comparison with what else is out there in the field of chiropractic and other fields as well when it comes to manual therapy, especially utilizing and implementing all the technologies that I've gotten through your teaching throughout the years, your mentoring throughout the years.
Well, it's been a fun road, and we were all set up to come back over and do a presentation in Sweden, and of course the COVID hit and everything got shut down. Yeah. So I don't know if Jacob has been in touch with you, or if you've been in touch with Jacob, but I miss Sweden and I miss the Swedish group. I love them. Yeah, I feel very home in Sweden.
Yeah, we'll get you back here. We'll get you back here.
That plane flight is starting to become a challenge at this stage. It's not the plane flight; it's the recovery when I get back that kills me now. I'm experiencing I'm coming up to 81 before too long, and I know it.
Well, we'll take good care of you when you're here. So
you always do. You always do, my friend.
Well,
just not eating any of that stinky fish.
Now the Christmas is coming up. We have the Christmas table, julbord. So this is time of the year where we eat herring and all this kind of raw fish. That's been
I don't mind that stuff. It's the fermented stuff I don't want to be around.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
There's something wrong with you.
They had to eat that to survive in the old days.
That's true.
And we stick with it. Tradition. Fortunately enough, it's just like 1 week a year. Some eat it more often, but definitely. Well, I'll be stopping recording for now, and I'd love to talk a little bit further with you after, just a few minutes after. Yeah.
Okay, you bet. And hello to everybody, and come on, Sweden, lead the world in chiropractic.
Yeah. And thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to have you back, Dr. Barwell.
Whenever.